Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you could tell by the graphic, today I'm going to be testing out a new channel feature, which I call Graphic Novel Throwbacks. Quite a while ago, when I first rebranded this channel, I wanted to not just have it focus on, specific RPGs or, whether it be just tabletop RPGs or any particular genre or any particular play mode of RPGs, whether it be on, on a tabletop or on the computer screen or the video game monitor. I also wanted to delve into uh, related materials for RPGs, and that includes graphic novels and comics and movies and such. And so this is my first delving into that aspect of gaming, and you know I just wanted to come up with something that would be interesting for myself. And so this morning, I was just going through my collection and I grabbed a hold of a stack of 13 graphic novels, all of them, fairly old. And I said, all right, well, let's just see which one is on top. And that's the one that is going to be the first episode of this new feature. So I didn't put it on the main screen here to begin with, so I wanted this to be, somewhat of a surprise. And so now I'm going to shift and you'll see which graphic novel I ended up picking. So Thrud the Barbarian. So if you're not familiar, and I'll do a brief run through of the Wikipedia on this particular graphic novel and this character. I end up sneezing, hold on. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. So, Thrud the Barbarian. So, Thrud the Barbarian was a comic strip that was created by Carl Critchlow back in the early 80s, I believe 1981. And it was a comic strip that ran in White Dwarf magazine, which was associated with Games Workshop. And I certainly followed it in the magazine back then, but when the graphic novel came out in 1987, I made sure that I picked it up, and so here we have it. Now this isn't in the greatest of condition. As a matter of fact, the binding has separated from the rest of the book, but the book itself, color quality and everything is still pretty decent. For a book that is now 31 years old, it's not too shabby. So as I started like opening this up earlier, just a few minutes earlier, and flipping through, I noticed, you have some advertisements here for 1987. So this is either the first edition of Warhammer, probably the second though, so I mean, going through some of these older books, it's kind of, very nostalgic to come across some of these things. And so in this particular volume of the graphic novel, and I know they've reproduced graphic novels since then, and I don't know if they're either more comprehensive than this or simply reprints, but you can still get, Thrud the Barbarian in graphic novel form for fairly cheap on either eBay and even in some cases on Amazon. So this particular one has six different story strands. So there's, Thrud Says Hello, The Three Tasks of Thrud, The Angry Wizard, The Origins of Thrud, Thrud the Destroyer, and The Brains Behind Thrud. So six different sections, and I believe something like five different story lines for this. And just flipping through, I mean, I'll show you. Oh, let me move that. That's it away. So this is the world of Thrud. I'll let it catch into focus. And you can see it's really designed to spoof Robert E. Howard's Hyborian age. And so you can see Thrud comes from Simpleton, and which is, obviously Samaria in Robert E. Howard's world. And you can see Antiqua and Manaheim, although that should have been really up above. But anyway, um, I mean, kind of weird that they do have Armenia, which is, you know, um, probably get some scrutiny today. So as you can see, the artwork, it's all black and white, and you know, again, 31 years later, the book is really held up, with the exception of the binding. You can see the spoofing of Conan just goes right through, and this guy is actually Chronoman, a reoccurring character, and kind of a doofus himself, um, as is Thrud. And you can see Thrud down at the bottom here actually kills him, splits him in two, but he comes back later on, so it's not meant to have any real serious continuity. But flipping through, you can see there's quite a few stories. I believe I'm in the initial story here, and so this is where Conan or Conan Thrud is being introduced to the various villains that he's going to keep on reoccurring, you know, encounters with throughout his comic strips. So these were comic strips. So here's Thrud the Barbarian, the three tasks of Thrud, and chapter one is Black Treachery, and it's just a one page, it's a one page comic strip, and then chapter two is similarly one page. Chapter three, so these either ran in three consecutive um, monthly magazines, or perhaps they were spread out a little bit longer than that. I'm really not quite sure. That's something that, I can easily research later. So the task is chapter four, chapter five. So the three tasks, ran quite a long time, so quite a few chapters. So this might have been, potentially a 7 month long strip, for this. Thread sophisticated. All right, so it's kind of showing Thread. So here is Carl's depiction of himself, I believe. It's been a long, long time since I've read this, probably about 30 years, so it's, but I will spend some time today going through this, and doing some reading, and at least some of it. I don't want to handle it too much. But going through, I do want to get to near the end, and you'll see some connections to the 1987 area. The late 80s or mid to late 80s when this was produced, and there's a lot of connections to other characters from other comics or other, and all of it's spoof. Um, so obviously this is Conan the Destroyer, and so it's making some connections and spoofing of Conan the Destroyer, the movie at the time. I know that there was one panel here that was really quite funny. It was a spoof on Rocky IV. Um, and let me see if I could find that again. So here's Conan the Destroyer. So here they have Mr. T, obviously, and this was around when Mr. T was in, I believe that would be Rocky 3. So Mr. T was pretty popular at the time, and so you see him in this book as well. Also, the A-Team was around that same time as well on television. So any chance that they had to spoof pop culture, especially comic and role playing and movie culture at the time, they Carl Critchlow certainly took that opportunity to do just that. And like I said, once again, when we get to the, so when we get to the end, there's about the author here, and there was the merchandise. Now I had some of these lead figures back then, and I just double checked on, eBay, and they go for about $60. Some of the smaller ones were still about 30 or so. I have one of them laying around. I'd have to dig him out, but I'm pretty sure. I kind of know what box he's in. Citadel Miniatures, back in the day, Citadel was a major company. Produced, between them and Ralph Partha, produced some of the best figures, around. This was long before Reaver was out. Oh, excuse me. And then finally, some more advertisements, which is really cool to look at advertisements from back in the day. Sorry, one more cough. I got a tickle in the throat. Nothing rum won't help. A little shot of rum will help that. So this is probably Call of Cthulhu. I would say it's second edition, or possibly third for 1987, but most likely second edition. Warlock of Firetop Mountain, I've never heard of. Paranoia, I vaguely remembered until, then I saw this. I was like, I remember hearing about that game at the time. Hill Sector Blues down here is kind of a play on Hill Street Blues, which was a popular television series back in the late 80s, early 90s. Halls of Horror, Statues of the Sorcerer, Vanishing Conjurer, I'm not familiar with that. Kings and Things, I'm not really familiar with that. Basically, Paranoia, obviously Call of Cthulhu. Paranoia actually struck my memory as having seen that before. Even Talisman. Talisman was a game system that was back during the time. I didn't play it. We were pretty much focused on, Dungeons and Dragons and Bushido and Twilight 2000, especially in the later 80s. And I pretty much stopped playing tabletop role-playing games around 1989. So this was kind of pushing the tail end of my tabletop gaming. But anyway, it was actually nice. It was actually nice to come across it and to flip through this graphic novel. And like I said, I have quite a few other graphic novels, at least 12 other ones, and I probably have more than that to flip through as part of this series. So I hope you like this new feature. If you did, please hit like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Share the video. That would be great. Comments. If there's something that you'd like for me to take a look at, please leave a comment. I'll take a look at it, especially if you have a Kickstarter out there or of a Kickstarter that I might be interested in, particularly like new graphic novels. So if you hear about any Kickstarters related to graphic novels, I'd like to take a look at those. And maybe I can do an episode where I'm doing a throwback and a new venture forward kind of video. So we can look at the old and the new. As far as comics are concerned, I'm going to do something very similar to comics, although I'm going to probably wait until January when Marvel's Conan the Barbarian starts to release, and I'll probably do a review series on that particular comic book series, because it's really the only comic book I really truly followed. And so that's something that I'll do. And then once I exhaust my graphic novel, my old graphic novels, then I'll start looking to do another feature, probably looking at some newer stuff. So once again, thanks for joining. This is going to be a packed weekend for myself. I'll probably get a game video up sometime in the next couple of hours as well. So you all have a great weekend. Thanks for joining in. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime very soon. Have a good one.